Jacqueline Wilson, and I write children's books, heaps and heaps of children's books. It's about 112, 13, 14, whatever. I've lost count of them all now. I absolutely love books, not my own, other people's books. But in my own books, I often write about other people's books too. In this book, Secrets, which is about two girls, there's India and Treasure, and India has an absolute passionate interest in a wonderful and moving book called The Diary of Anne Frank. I'll be talking about that in a little minute. And then this book, Wave Me Goodbye, which is about evacuees in the Second World War. And this girl, Shirley, who's a little bit like me, she loves reading, and her favourite book is Bally Shoes, and she likes to pretend she's one of the children in Bally Shoes. I should be talking about that too. This book, Katie, is actually inspired by a Victorian book called What Katie Did. And that's a lovely story, but it's got some quite old-fashioned ideas in it. So I wanted to write a modern version of Katie. And that's from the television serial of Katie, and that girl was fantastic. And this book, For Children and It, is inspired by an Edwardian book by a woman called Edith Nesbit called 5 Children and It. And 4 Children and It actually was made into a film, which you might have seen in the cinema or indeed on television. So there are some of my books that are about other books. And I thought I'd tell you about 10 books that meant a great deal to me when I was a child, right from about 5 all the way up into my early teens. Now, the first book that I'm going to mention is The Enchanted Wood by Enid Blyton. This is my actual childhood copy. It looks a bit old-fashioned now, but I love, love, love this cover. And it's about these children here who go to an enchanted wood, and in the enchanted wood there's a faraway tree, a tree that goes right up into the clouds, and there are all sorts of funny people that live in the faraway tree. There's Silky the fairy, and when I was 5 or 6, I desperately wanted to be Silky the fairy. She was just my ideal person. And she has a funny friend, Moonface. There's a weird old man called Saucepan who has saucepans hung all over himself. There are all sorts of odd characters that live in this faraway tree. But the really exciting bit, you can go up a little ladder right at the top, through the clouds, and there's a different land up there. Sometimes scary lands, and sometimes funny lands, and sometimes the most beautiful lands ever. My favourite story was always the last one, which is the land of, let me see, Land of Birthdays. And I wanted that book read to me again and again, and it was a big incentive for me to start reading myself. Here's the modern version there, with the faraway tree and some of the odd creatures. So that's The Enchanted Wood. We'll pop that one there. And then this is my childhood copy of a book called Bally Shoes by Noel Stretfield. That was the book that my girl Shirley, in my book Wave Me Goodbye, was obsessed by. And it won't surprise you to know that I loved it too. I wanted to do ballet dancing. My mum wouldn't let me. So I had a pair of pink bedroom slippers and danced around our flat pretending to do ballet. I probably look ridiculous. But this is a fantastic story about 3 girls who go to stage school, and the eldest wants to be an actress, the middle one doesn't want to do anything stagey at all and wants to be a car mechanic, and the young one wants to be a ballet dancer. And it's all about how they probably are going to achieve all their ambitions. Now, this book is what Katie did. I did a modern version of this book. It's about a lovely tomboy character, Katie Carr, who's the eldest of many brothers and sisters. She's very lively, very naughty, doesn't do what she's told. Then she falls very badly off a swing, hurts herself so badly she can't walk. She has to use a wheelchair. And this is the bit that I worry about in this book, the old book, that I loved as a child, and it's still a good read now. She is told that if she's very, very good and very, very careful and very kind to everyone and very, very holy and to pray a lot, then she will maybe get better. Now, I think that's not what we believe now. I think very sadly, if you break part of your back, it's not very likely that you'll be able to walk again. And so I wrote my book about a naughty, funny girl called Katie, who's a bit of a tomboy, but show when she has a similar accident, very sadly, she doesn't get better, but she learns that if you use a wheelchair, you can still be fun. You can still play all sorts of different sports. You can just have a good time, and it's not quite the same as your life was before, but it's a new life, and it still can be a great life too. But I also go back to this Katie version, and it's fun to compare the two of them. Now we have this old battered book, but it's available as a lovely brand new paperback, and it's called The Family from One End Street. And I loved this book because it was about a poor family. I come from a poor family. We lived on a council estate. We didn't have much money at all. But most of the books that I read when I was a child were about quite posh children, and they lived in lovely big houses and had great big gardens to play in. And I liked reading these books, but I thought, why aren't there any stories about girls like me who don't have quite enough clothes to wear, and life is a bit of a struggle. And so this book was really special to me. I loved this family. I particularly like the two girls in it. The eldest, Lily Rose, tries to be helpful, but she often makes mistakes, and I was a bit like that. And then the younger one, Kate, is quite bright at school, and she loves reading, and she works hard, and she's very proud of her school uniform. Well, I don't think I was as bright as Kate when I was a child, but I did work hard. I certainly worked hard at all my English lessons, and I cared desperately about what I wore. And I think this is a beautifully told story. And I love the pictures. Now, I don't know whether you'd be allowed to, but if you have your own paperback copy and you crayon in very lightly, it makes you have a very special coloured book too, not just black and white illustrations. But so that's what I like to do. Now, this book is 5 Children and It. And I told you about my book, 4 Children and It. I wasn't copying the book in that mine is a modern version, and lots of different things happen in my book. But the one character is the same in E. Nesbit's original story, and my story is this weird, magical creature. He's called the Samiad, and he's quite grumpy, but he can grant wishes. Now, who wouldn't want to meet a magical creature like this Samiad and think of what you might wish for? Would you like to be rich, famous, really talented at something? The children in this book and my book all have different wishes. But as often happens in stories, things can go wrong. But you can have a lot of fun reading about these characters, and certainly I had a lot of fun making up my own wishes for my own children in the books. Now, the other E. Nesbit story that I absolutely adored as a child is The Railway Children. And it's been on television in the past. There have been 2 different films about it. You might have The Railway Children as an old DVD. Maybe your mums and dads or granny or grandpa actually saw the original film. It was very, very popular. The story still works a treat about these children. Oh, now here is my dog suddenly wandered in, wagging his tail. I think he might like reading too. And I so much liked this story that I went in for a painting competition where you had to draw characters from the Railway Children. And I think you were supposed to do a train too, but I didn't know much about trains then. So I didn't draw a train. I drew the 3 children waving these flags and coloured them in carefully with my watercolours. And to my huge surprise, I actually won the competition. Never won a writing competition when I was young, but won the painting one. So I'm extra fond of The Railway Children. It's a fantastic read. Very easy to read too, I promise you. Now, as you get a bit older, you probably sort of tire a bit of children's books. So these were all books that I read from about 11 upwards. And maybe if you're younger than that, you might like to jot down 1 or 2 of the titles for when you get a bit older. I think my most revered book as a child, and one that really did change my life, was this one, The Diary of Anne Frank. And there's a picture of Anne on the cover of the book. And she wrote her diary in the Second World War. She was Jewish. She had to hide from the Nazis who were trying to round up all the Jews and take them away. It's so moving. She's 13 when it starts. She's 15 when it ends. When she starts writing, she's just like any 13-year-old. She's tells you all about her birthday presents and her best friends and any of the boys that she likes at school. And it's so light-hearted. And then as she has to go into hiding with her family, it gets darker and more worrying, and you really feel you're locked up with her. It's a fantastic, moving story, and I've read it again and again and again. Still like to read it now. And this book, I remember my first week at secondary school, which it can be a bit disconcerting sometimes. I actually went up to the school library, and a teacher walked past me and just picked up this book, I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith, and said, "Think you might like that," and then just walked off. And I opened it up, and it's got the most interesting first paragraph I've ever read. You find a copy and see if you agree. And I just went on reading and reading. And again, it's in diary form, but this is a fictional diary. It's all made up. It's a romantic story, a sad story, a funny story. Again, it's a book I've read, as you can see, many times over. Here's a book called The Green Gage Summer by Rumer Godden. And this, do you know, I think this cover, it doesn't say who illustrated it, but it looks like a very early Shirley Hughes illustration to me. And Shirley Hughes, I think her books are just wonderful. You might have read some for Alfie books. There are heaps and heaps when you're little to read. But Shirley Hughes also illustrated, this is a book for teenagers. I love this book. It's about a family that go to France. Their mother is ill. They are left to fend for themselves in this little hotel in the summer. all sorts of different things happen to them. It's a story about growing up. It's a story about envying your prettier older sister. It's a story about falling in love rather hopelessly for the first time. It's a brilliant book, absolutely brilliant. And then the last book, Do Not Groan, as is obvious, it's a classic and it was written for adults, but it's a cracking story. It's generally the book that I choose for my all-time favourite book. It's Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. It's a Victorian book that I'm very keen on the Victorians. But the first 9 chapters are about Jane when she's a little girl. And the most amazing and terrifying and frightening things happen to Jane. She's an orphan, but she's treated really cruelly, both by the family looking after her, and then she goes to this scary school and horrid things happen there, but she does make a best friend there. I read this book, first of all, just the first 9 chapters, all about Jane when she was 10, and I thought them fantastic, much more realistic and interesting than any other children's book I'd read. And then when I got a bit older, I just got caught up in the dramatic and scary and romantic things that happen in this book. It's a lovely, lovely book. I'm not saying necessarily plough all the way through it, but if you really like reading, do try those first 9 chapters. And you never know, if you're extra, especially intellectual and bright, you might get all the way through it and feel the better for it. So there's a big selection of my books. An apology to any young men watching, because there aren't really that many stories about boys, but I'm sure there are lots of other authors who can recommend all sorts of books about boys too. But these are my favourite books. But I wonder what your favourite books are. I had to make a little list of my favourite books when asked to talk to you about this, and maybe you'd like to make a little list of your favourite books. You could get together with some of your friends or in the classroom and discuss not only which are your favourite books, but think why. Is it because they make you laugh? Is it because they make you cry? Is it because you get so absorbed in the story you just don't want to do anything else? Is it because the characters in the book are as real as your best friends? Try and think of 3 reasons why you really like the books that you do. And if you're somebody that really doesn't like reading, try hard to find any book that actually is about something you like football or what else can I think of? Chess or ballet or any kind of autobiography by your favourite influencer, or somebody you've seen on TikTok who happens to have written a book. Any book, it doesn't have to be a literary book, but just find a book that you like and then think, but why do I like it? And then you can compare notes, you can have a good discussion, and you might find all sorts of other good reads. I hope so. Have a good time and happy reading.